I wanted to share with you a story by Nicole Carlos that was published over at Salon. It's titled, "Scientists Just Came to a Disturbing Conclusion About the Political Divide in the United States." And I think that this is actually a much bigger issue than even this study came to. And I'll get to that in just a moment. What they're pointing out is that America has become increasingly polarized over the last 40 years or thereabouts. And it's largely been driven not by the left moving farther to the left, right? We're not even back to where we were in 1966 when we got Medicare, passed or 65 with the Voting Rights Act, or 64 with the Civil Rights Act. We have been instead moving farther and farther and farther to the right, year after year after year. And not only as a nation, but within the political sphere, those on the right have been moving so far to the right that many of them now are literally in the fascist part of the right-wing spectrum. So this model was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Scientists. And what they noted, here's a quote from it: "We see this very disturbing pattern in which a shock brings people together a little bit closer initially." Now, what they're talking about is, like, for example, think of World War II, right? We got hit with Pearl Harbor. The whole country pulled together. Now, that was a time when Republicans didn't have a lot of power, and Democrats ran the country by and large, all across the country. Franklin Roosevelt was president. The New Deal was very popular. We were doing all these socialist things like Social Security and minimum wage and whatnot. And the country just pulled together, Republicans as well as Democrats. I realize that the America First movement, which preceded December 7, 1941, from the mid-30s right up until 1941, with Lucky Lindbergh and all that kind of stuff, that they were opposed to our fighting Hitler. We had a pro-Hitler movement in the United States. In fact, the German-American Bund had, meetings in Madison Square Garden, thousands of guys with Nazis, swastikas, doing the Nazi salute and everything back in the day. But when we got hit on Pearl Harbor, we pulled together. And those voices were just basically silenced. We saw something very similar to that on 9/11. On 9/11, when the United States was attacked, we had Republicans in charge. George W. Bush was president, and Republicans controlled the House and the Senate, as I recall. And the consequence of that was that Democrats came to the Republicans' side and said, we're not going to turn this into a partisan issue. We are all Americans, and we have all been attacked. And of course, this was at a time, when George W. Bush was seen as an illegitimate president because the Supreme Court had handed the White House to him after his brother down in Florida had rigged the vote. And pretty much everybody knew it. It was common knowledge in 2001 when 9/11 happened. But nonetheless, the Democrats said, "We're with you, George." I mean, to the point of going to war with Iraq and Afghanistan, sadly. But that's an example of coming together. But anyhow, back to this study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They say shock brings people a little bit closer initially, but if polarization is too extreme, eventually the effects of a shared fate, like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, and I would say in this case the pandemic, eventually the effects of a shared fate are swamped by the existing divisions and people become divided even on the shock issue, which is exactly what has happened with COVID. The Republicans turned COVID into a political issue. They politicized a virus. And they continue to use it to try to tear America apart, to the point where you've got, like Governor Stitt, what is it, Montana, I think, saying to his National Guard people, "Oh, you don't have to worry about getting vaccinated. Everything will be," and now they're in deep trouble. Kristi Noem bragging about bringing hundreds of thousands of COVID-infected people to South Dakota, and having South Dakota then thereafter, for the next month or so, having one of the highest death rates in America. This is a badge of honor for Kristi Noem, that as governor, she probably killed more people per capita than any other governor in the United States, although I think that Ron DeSantis is giving her a good run for his money, or for her money. But they note in this piece, they say, if we reach that point, we cannot unite even in the face of war, climate change, pandemics, or other challenges to the survival of our society. And what I would like to point out is that this is not something that has just recently happened and didn't come about just because Donald Trump was president and he was a professional liar. He spent his whole career being a liar. Lying about his taxes, lying about what his properties were worth to get his taxes down, lying to people who wanted to buy condos, lying about his various products, lying about his school. He got actually, successfully prosecuted for that one. Lying about his nonprofit, he got successfully prosecuted for that one too. All three of his kids had to go to class to learn how to be ethical, stewards of a nonprofit. But I would submit to you that this was not just Donald Trump. That what happened was in the 1970s, actually, I think we can take this back to 1954. The Brown v. Board decision, and sadly, so much in this country goes back to race. In 1954, the Brown v. Board decision said segregated schools are no longer legal in the United States. The right wing, the same right-wing people who in the 30s, leading up to 1941, had been saying, Hitler's an okay guy and we can work with him. Those same people started saying, oh my God, the Supreme Court has been taken over by communists. Earl Warren, Dwight Eisenhower's appointee to the Supreme Court, is a communist, and we need to impeach him for saying that our little white children have to go to school with black children. I mean, that was the issue. And that permeated our politics increasingly, and you had right-wing billionaires jump into this. Fred Koch supporting the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society was all about this. The communists in the State Department, John Stormer, none dare call it treason. Leading up to the 1960s, where Richard Nixon was carrying this banner and felt that, he was so right. It was so important to fight this socialism, this creeping socialism, that he was willing to commit treason against the United States of America and tell the South Vietnamese, don't cut a deal with Lyndon Johnson to have peace in Vietnam. And as a consequence of that treason that Richard Nixon committed in 1968, another 20,000 plus Americans and another million plus Vietnamese died. Can you imagine the blood that man has on his soul? And then Reagan came along and said, oh yeah, well, same deal. We'll cut a deal with the Iranians to hold the hostages to destroy the Jimmy Carter presidency. But what was happening throughout this entire time was this right-wing group of billionaires and foundations, family foundations, were pouring money into these right-wing think tanks that were churning out right-wing propaganda, and they were polarizing America in a way that on the right, on the left, people were still saying, oh yeah, well, however the election turns out, that's how it turns out, and we can all work together. Yes, we may disagree on politics, but we're all brothers and sisters here. On the right, they were saying a very different message, starting explicitly in the 1980s, saying that, Ronald Reagan, for example, when the AIDS crisis happened, saying, well, gay people aren't really part of America. We're not going to do anything about that. They're getting what they deserve, was basically the message of the Reagan administration with regard to HIV/AIDS. And then that got, amplified and then George W. Bush becomes president, 9/11 happens, and the Democrats, the left, said, okay, we will join you. But I am guessing if Al Gore had been president, it might not have played out that way. Because I think we were already at that point in 2001. But Al Gore wasn't president. So here now we have a Democrat president, Joe Biden, during a pandemic with now a new variant coming along, promising to make things even worse. And the right is promoting an ideology, a theory, a meme that is causing more and more Americans to die every day. I mean, the death numbers are going up. our count over at TrumpDeathToll.org is for today, brought to you by the Hartmann Report, by the way. TrumpDeathToll.org is 793,228. It's amazing. And I think this is because the Republican Party has ceased to be an American political party in the sense of like America. I was going to say America first, but echoes of the old neo-Nazi movement. But a party that puts the well-being of America first. They have ceased to be that, and I would argue that they ceased to be that definitely in 1981 and arguably in 1968. And the Republican Party has become just about power and wealth for the top 1%, period. This is their only priority. And they don't care how many people die in order to hold power to maintain that. And that's why, what these scientists, they're saying, oh my God, look at this. I mean, like I said, it's the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And they're concerned that this might be an end point for America, because the right has become so heavily polarized that they're literally not willing to work with the left for the good of the country. So how does this play out? What do we do with this? In my opinion, the way it's going to play out is one of two ways. Either the right seizes power, in which case they're going to continue doing everything they can to destroy democracy, the left, and any semblance of a free and open media and society in the United States. So we're going to become like Hungary. Or they're going to be marginalized, and we're going to see through what they're doing.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And the next 3 years are the key to the whole thing, which is why it's so important that you and I keep talking about this stuff and keep waking people up.